Good morning, it's Rosemary Balu here from ARTbop, and this morning I'm doing something a little different. I'm going to video my reading the article that I've just published on ARTbop, and it'll be on YouTube. Appropriately, this one's called Take One Dead Chicken and Artists Gotta Eat. Used to be, recipes called for a specific type of chicken, an organic chicken, a free-range chicken, a happy-to-die-for-your-dinner chicken. Now all we want is one dead chicken. Chicken stock, or if you prefer the contemporary nomenclature, bone broth, is one of the most useful things I can find in my freezer. Although this week, as my lockdown lunacy cleaning and gardening frenzy continued, I found myself emptying 3 ice cream containers of unspecified evil-looking fluid, which may have started life as stock, into the compost heap. There is a very big something to be said for naming and dating the freezer contents. Rural living brings that exquisite combination of life, death, and dinner incredibly close to the table. A very small child of my acquaintance stood on his dining room chair and looked straight down at his dinner. Is this a dead cow? It seems it's never too early to learn to recognise the sound of the home kill gun or learn to count. Even I can identify that particular sound, and that's without even seeing the truck and the hoist. Recently I heard it with indifferent regularity echoing the Whakamarama Hills, freezers being stocked up for lockdown and beyond. So back to dead chickens. I regard those plastic-packed corpses as one of the most wonderful aspects of my culinary life. Having once had to help pluck and gut 100 chickens, enough already, I adore the almost sterile presentation of the ready-to-use fleshy little body. And if I haven't managed to put you off cooked chicken yet, the images of what's left over after one of my stock bone broth soup-making escapades may do. My favourite way of making soup is to use the carcass, artistically known as the frame of the chicken. I've found it doesn't matter if it's a cooked chicken frame or the frame of a chicken I have amateurishly dissected for future reference. I confess that on the occasions I've used the frame and leftover bits of a supermarket rotisserie chicken, my eventual soup has had a certain exotic flavour. Best one, I think, was after I almost annihilated the remains of a chili and lime flavoured chicken. If I'm using an uncooked frame or the frame of a plain old unseasoned cooked chicken, here's what I do. The results can vary. I suppose chickens are like people. Some are just more tasty than others. In my large pot, aka the stock pot, in which I just made jam, I put some olive oil in the bottom, then cut an onion in half or quarters if I'm feeling energetic. If I haven't been saving the vegetable peelings in an ice cream container in the freezer, I'll chop a carrot into about 3 big bits and drop those in. On top of that, I drop in the chicken carcass and brown the whole lot. Before it reaches the point of incineration, watch it as an incineration occurs faster than you can believe, I cover it all with boiling water. Please don't write and tell me it should be cold water. I don't care. At this point I add in any washed herbs I can find in the garden. Rosemary, sage, well that's dry in the airing cupboard at the moment, thyme, and I grind in some black pepper. I leave it on low on the back of the stove and go away. As I do not want to die in a domestic fire, I come back regularly to check there's enough water in the pot. I've tried using my current slow cooker to make soup stocks and casseroles, but it just doesn't make them like the old one did. So I've Luddite decided I'll use the prehistoric technique of a pot on the stove. But if you love your slow cooker or you have a deep and personal relationship with your new Instapot, do whatever makes you happy. The whole point of boiling up the tragic looking carcass of a former feathered friend is to end up with something edible. If you need a deep and meaningful relationship with your kitchenware, I recommend you get a cat, for affection, not for food. After you've boiled the pot contents for an unspeakably long time, it will go murky, and it's difficult to identify with precision what is or was what. For some reason it remains easy to identify the carrots as they are orange and stand out in the otherwise slightly mangrove brown. I like to let my pot of horrors cool slightly before straining it. This is the most kitchen utensil intensive part of the process for me. I've tried a spoon thing to get all the big bits out, tricky stuff requiring a steady hand. I've used a medium-sized strainer sieve and fished about like a child looking for a lost goldfish. I've poured through the sieve into another pot. I've poured into my steamer pot. You can see why I let it cool. One unfortunate slip with the boiling stuff and it would be that dreaded combination of A and H, ambulance and hospital. Although I consider the combined extended family derision more frightening. As I do not have a cat, I put the remains of the day into a recycled porridge oats bag and then keep it in the bottom of the freezer to be silently removed by the weekly rubbish collection. I like to let the stock have a period of quiet repose in a cool climate. This is not for romantic purposes, but allows all the chicken fat to set or congeal, such an unpleasant word, on the top of the container. I take that off too and put into another recycled bag to be silently removed when the opportunity arises. At this point it's begin the bliss. Well, that's the bliss for me, probably not for the dead chicken, who is somewhere up where dead chickens go, spitting feathers, as they say. In cooking terms, I'm the product of a reasonably standard English post-war diet. Think meat and vegetables followed by a cooked pudding. This means that I want my end product soup to remind me of my childhood in sage and onion stuffing, roast pumpkin and potatoes and baked beans on toast. So I add to my basic stock murk more chopped up carrots, potatoes, kumara, onions, garlic, pumpkin and any of the leftover dead chicken flesh/meat. I put in more herbs from the garden, funnily enough the same ones I put in the stock. Rosemary, sage, thyme, black pepper. I've got either chives or little multiplying onions growing in the garden and I'll wash those and cut up. They float around like cut grass, which can be slightly disconcerting. I'll also wash, chop up and throw in anything suspiciously green, and that includes lettuce. I don't usually put salt in my cooking, so it's not an oversight, it's not mentioned. If I'm feeling extravagant or daring or both, I'll empty a tin of baked beans into the mix. And if I'm feeling lonely, lazy or busy or all three, I'll wash about a cup of brown rice and sprinkle that in. The brown rice is a wonderful addition if you find the potatoes you plan to use have decided to sprout, or you ate the potatoes with olive oil, rosemary and cheese with a glass of wine on Friday night while watching something on YouTube. Life can be difficult. I love thick soups, not only in winter. I've just gobbled my way through 2 huge pans full, one chicken, vegetables and rice, and the other one chicken, vegetables and pumpkin. They're so useful to have lurking in the freezer in small containers for hysterically busy day lunches. I do recommend you label stuff in the freezer if you can't see into the container, although visual aids are not always reliable. Cold, tired and fed up from trying to achieve something or other outside, I raced in to have my pumpkin soup, ha bloody ha, was marmalade pulp. Have you noticed how for 5 minutes you stare at the marmalade pulp, thinking this will transform it into pumpkin soup? No, you're obviously too well fed. Wanting the equivalent of toast to have with your soup? Now's the time to become the Bay of Plenty's Julia Child. Griddle scones are basically self-raising flour, olive oil or melted butter and milk mixed together and patted into a round on the griddle. I usually use the flat of the mixing knife or the back of the spoon I've used to mix the dough. I use a crepe pan I found in one of the local op shops. If you recognise it, you can't have it back. I heat the pan up, grease it with either more olive oil or a piece of saved butter paper, how droll. I put the ball of dough in the middle of the pan, sprinkle it with flour and pat it flat with whatever I use to mix the dough. I generally lower the heat to turn it off, but don't turn it off. I leave it on the first side until I think it's cooked or going to burn, and then I flip it over with a short-handled fish slice thing. It's not a fish slice, it's like a fish slice with a much more stable handle. I cook the other side and then slide it onto a plate. It's like a very thin, flat scone. If you're feeling decadent, you can spread some butter on it. Delicious with your soup, particularly if you grate a respectable amount of locally made Parmesan cheese on the soup. If you want something for your traditional Kiwi morning tea and you don't want to turn the oven on, mix up this dough with some ground ginger and cinnamon and then eat with butter and jam. Sickeningly good. You'll need a big lie down before you get back to the lawnmower. And that's where I'm going right now. It's a New Zealand institution. Lawn mowing, and I'm doing it. Now, that's today's Take One Dead Chicken, an artist's gotta eat from ARTbop. We're an online creative arts magazine. We have some wonderful content in the archives of ARTbop, contributed by some of the Bay's very, very talented creative community. In these trying times, be safe, be happy, and above all, be kind. Bye now.